probably just dead air or my dumbass talking. Um, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and assume we're live. So, welcome to Slow News Day. My name is Steve Poikinen. I am here in beautiful Boulder Creek, California, where the flannel shirt is our state flag, the pit bull is our state bird, and cannabis is our state flower. I am joined this evening by Eleanor Goldfield, and I'm very stoked for this. She was on the Free Assange Vigil 6, 7 weeks ago or a month ago. It's all blending together, and that was a fantastic show. Eleanor is a creative activist, journalist. She is the founder and host of the show Act Out, which you can watch on Free Speech TV and wherever you get your podcasts. And she co-hosts Common Censored with Lee Camp. Welcome to the show, Eleanor. I'm glad to have you on today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. We were talking a little bit off camera about these spontaneous protests that have just sort of sprang up in Iran, and you gave me your thoughts. I'd like to kind of go over that just a little bit more with the audience because it's going to lead us to what I definitely want to talk about. So what if there's a big ass protest in Iran? What's our job? What
Our
do we
job
do as
is
Americans?
our job is, if you really want to, share information about it, but mostly stay the fuck out of it. Because our job as American residents or citizens is really to stay out of the business of other countries and their choice for government, their right to self determination and autonomy. And I think that it's very important, regardless of how you feel about that government. You might not like the idea of a theocracy in Iran, or you might not like the idea of of some things that Maduro does in Venezuela, but it's none of your business. This is the right of the people who live with that government to decide if they want that government or not. And so our job is to really stay out of it and put an immense amount of pressure on our government to stay the hell out of it. And I think it's very important that we take a hold of that, because we, as children of this empire, have an incredible opportunity and, in fact, a responsibility to topple this empire so that people around the world have that right to self-determination and autonomy. So I think that that's something that's very important that we highlight, and that prefaces any sort of conversations about protests against respective governments in other countries.
I'm really glad you brought up Venezuela, because this next Sunday I'm having David Trondheim and Al Suarez on. They're doing a documentary on the embassy siege. Al was up there for about a week outside. He's in a number of the videos trying to deliver food and whatnot. And it's Hong Kong, Venezuela, Iran, Bolivia, Honduras, Guatemala. It looks like we're either back channel messing with India or trying to influence what's going on with the protests against Modi. Is there a country that we're not fucking around in where we should, off the top of your head? Iceland?
Well, I think so. Here's the thing: we are fucking around with all of the countries, but actively we are fucking around and trying to topple countries that aren't white. You know, the argument is Venezuela has a lot of oil. Okay, well, so does Norway. You don't see us you don't see us engaging in economic warfare with Norway. So I think it's really important to note that that this imperialism has a very, very strong tie to white supremacy. And we have to, I mean, that's part of this, that's part of the puzzle here. And
Well, that's
and yeah,
American exceptionalism, isn't it? Isn't
it's
that what they
white
mean by
American
American?
exceptionalism, right?
When we've got to be the world's police, when we've got to run the show everywhere, when we have this culture that supports and nurtures being a global bully, you're right. At the root of that is not only white supremacism, but I a weird kind of nationalism that allows for the rape and pillage of the people and natural resources of poor brown countries to kind of add to what our American ethos is.
Well, I'm reminded of a line from the movie Maverick, which is one of my favorite Mel Gibson films, despite the fact that he's a horrible human being. But it was this great line where he's standing there and they're out in the West somewhere, and he said, and there's, there are Native Americans present, and he says, well, I figure it's their fault for being on our land before we got here. But and it's such a brilliant line because, yeah, that's basically the paradigm of the U.S., not only with regards to the land that the U.S. government is still occupying, but with regards to everywhere. I mean, it's why our response to the Iraqi parliament was, we fundamentally, the U.S. government fundamentally feels that we have the right to anything that's going on in Iraq, just like we have the right to, the minerals that are in West Virginia. It's the same idea in the U.S. government's mind that's our stuff. Those are our resources. That's why AFRICOM exists. I mean, just across the board, that's why we are in these places.
There's going to be a national day of protest January 25th, and I guess the impetus of it was the potential of World War III with Iran. I know that I'm going to go up to San Francisco to cover it, and then there's a concurrent Free Assange rally that's going to take place on Powell and Market. If anybody's watching out here in your California local, San Francisco local, come to Powell and Market on January 25th. Let's hang out. Do you have plans for that day? Are you already organizing? I know you said that you were going to open for Lee Camp, but I don't know if that was the 25th of this month or next month.
Yeah, so that is the 25th of this month. 25th and 26th will be in Philadelphia. So hoping to be able to be a part of a protest that's happening in Philadelphia. And folks can find out, by going to Answer Coalition's website. Also, Code Pink will have information about those protests that are happening across the country. But this is a continuation of what we saw last week after the U.S. Basically assassinated Soleimani for no reason. And so this is a way to continue building that momentum, because it's super important that with any movement, whether it be with regards to the environment or the military, which of course these are connected, but with whatever issue you're dealing with that day, that we recognize that we have to continue building momentum. And we have to make it clear to people that are coming into the movement, hey, it's great that you're here. It's awesome that you came to this protest or action or what have you, but this is not it. This is not a one-off. Let's not go home and check the activism box and think that we're done. This is because it has to be paralleled to what the other side is doing. And they don't just invade a country and then go home. There's a continuation of this imperialism and this colonialism and this capitalist destruction, and we have to be on that same page.
It's a fantastic way of framing it. I think that a lot of activists will do that. We'll go to one protest, one rally, and be like, all right, solidarity. I'm going to go watch Obama flicks for the next 3 days,
Yeah.
Chomsky calls the drone program, which we used to assassinate Soleimani and so many other people all across the world, the global assassination program. And there is not a single major presidential candidate that does not support the drone program. Do you think that we'll see a high-profile politician come out against the global assassination program, like in our lifetime?
Well, I guess that depends on how long our lifetimes are, right?
Fair.
But no, I think I was just on a show today talking about this, that Tulsi Gabbard is considered like the anti-war candidate, right? And in a lot of ways she is, but even she has said that when it comes to terrorism, we need to still remain strong, and that she would support military activity with regards to terrorism. Well, I got news for you. Terrorism is the ultimate loophole. It's why resolutions on Yemen have gone nowhere, because there's always that caveat that, well, we don't support the war in Yemen unless we're going after terrorists. Okay, it's why the AUMF exists, that says that you can go after anybody that's even loosely related to 9/11 if you can just say that they're terrorists. Well, guess what? You can call anybody a terrorist, and which we do.
Yeah.
So,
so they're dead too. Like that's
right.
All and if you guys don't know this at home, if a drone drops a bomb, 87 people die. They're all counted as enemy combatants by the U.S. military after the fact.
Well, and just geography and age. Anybody within the age range of like 17 and 90, if you're in a specific geographical location, you're an enemy combatant, which means that, of course, then drone strikes always hit their target, right? So I think with regards to, Tulsi's stance, that's super dangerous, and it's just not good enough. And I think in terms of domestic policy, sure, Bernie has a lot of great points, but I think that the fact that he isn't talking about ending the war machine, then that means that his comments on green energy, for instance, are a moot point, because the military-industrial complex is the largest consumer of fossil fuels in the world. It's equal to 140 countries. How could you possibly talk about a just transition and about a livable future if you're not talking about curtailing that destruction and that environmental destruction?
Because it's trying to get elected, and you don't want people to ask too many questions. I have several issues with Bernie Sanders. The biggest one on my list, because of the other show that I do, is that you can't get the man to say Julian Assange's name. Tulsi Gabbard has been spending a lot of time pandering to evangelicals and pandering to a almost fundamentalist white Christianity. And as much as I don't like regime change wars, and as much as I honestly believe it's a 50-50 chance whether Bernie, Tulsi, or Andrew Yang or John Delaney get elected, because we don't have free and fair elections. So it bothers me, I guess, to watch Tulsi go so hard to the religious right when there's 47% of the country that votes is independent, when evangelicals are a large voting bloc within the Republican Party, but trying to get them to step outside of their republicanism that they built that party since the mid-70s. But even more so with Ralph Reed and the Christian Coalition and everything that has evolved out of that.
But I think this also speaks to one of the dividing lines that I think that I try to dissect and talk about, is that, there are people in this country, for instance, that think abortion is murder, but there is actually a really small percentage of this country that thinks that. If you actually look at the statistics, it's just that they are the ones that have representation on that topic, and a wide range of topics. But really, if you go down to, and I grew up in the South, if you go down South and you sit down on somebody's porch and you talk to them, I guarantee most of them are going to say, I don't actually give a fuck if a woman has an abortion. I care about whether I'm going to have a pension. I care about whether I can pay rent. And that's why Bernie has also shown to be very popular with people who typically have voted Republican, because he says the shit that they want to hear, that how are they going to actually pay for things? What are they going to do about the cost of healthcare and things like that? So that's why you see people even on the right side leaning towards Bernie, and that's why it makes no sense to pander towards this sort of extremist right-wing mentality, because actually the overwhelming majority of people aren't that extremist about those viewpoints.
I agree with that. I grew up in central Indiana. The first campaign that I worked on was my dad's former student, David McIntosh, who ran as a Republican, got brought in with Newt Gingrich's Contract for America Congress. Also the first time I did cocaine. at a fundraiser for a very evangelical Republican one, hopeful congressman. Kids, if you ever want the good coke, hang out with Republicans. They have it. But one of the things that I had to do, and one of the things that made me like walk away from the electoral side and want to start to write about it, is they wanted me to hand out Christian Coalition voter value guides. I had to make sure that I was more than 100 feet away from the polling place, but I could be 100 feet and 6 inches. And they wanted me to shove these Christian Coalition voter value guides in people's faces. And I was like, I don't even like handing out flyers for raves. I'm not, can I phone it in? It was, but I mean, it just, the toll in 2020 that not spirituality, but white Jesus Christianity has, is one of the more frustrating aspects about living in the stupidest timeline. I don't think it's the worst timeline, and I'm certainly not the best timeline, but our president is in the WWE Hall of Fame. The last president got a Nobel Peace Prize and started 5 illegal wars. We're truly in the stupidest timeline.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think I think that the idea that the U.S. has, well, was ever great, first of all, but also that the U.S. has somehow moved away from its foundations as a country that was founded on genocide and slavery is absurd. The U.S. is still a white supremacist colonialist nation. And, that's evidenced, of course, by the imperialism that we mete out on the rest of the world. But it's also incredibly evident here at home. And I think that's the other reason that the anti-war movement is getting a bit of a boost now, not just because of recent events, but also because people are making the connections between police brutality, for instance, and the military-industrial complex. Because guess what? If it weren't for the 1033 program and the military, which for those who aren't aware, the 1033 program is basically a program that funnels military weaponry to police departments. And so we wouldn't have that if we also didn't have an imperialist war machine that's the biggest that the world has ever seen. And so people are making these connections between issues. And like I mentioned before, the environmental issue, those connections are there, and they're very vivid and obvious at this point in time. And I think people are really getting a sense of that imperialism is a home game as well. And so we suffer under that, just like many people in the rest of the world. And so I think even people that are, on the right side of things, like on the right wing side of things, are starting to feel like, well, but wait, if I want them to fix these roads, or if I want healthcare, or if I want my pension, and then maybe we have to do something about this ridiculous military budget. And so I think people are starting to move away from that. But I mean, you're right. This idea that the U.S. is not still a white supremacist, so-called Christian nation is absurd. Of course we are. And I think that the problem is that the value system is represented in Congress, but it's not actually out there. Like, if you wander through most places in the U.S., then most people are not like extremist right wing. It's just that the extremist right wing KKK factions are really loud and have the most representation in the halls of power.
Absolutely. And there's a direct line to money in politics for that. And there's a direct line to churches being tax exempt that still just grates me. I've said a number of times on this show that I don't think green capitalism is the answer to white nationalist capitalism or globalist fucking any kind of capitalism we have. Do you think there's a possibility to decouple the special interests that more and more seem to be behind, like Sunrise Movement or Extinction Rebellion or a number of the European activism organizations? Is there a possibility for the actual activists to like take the movement away from the halls of power?
I think I was having this conversation with a friend of mine this weekend, and I think like Extinction Rebellion is a great gateway drug, you know, because when I was like 13, 14, just getting into activism, I was a Democrat, you know, I'll admit it. And so I think that like people have to start somewhere, right? And I know that it's urgent, it's a crisis, we're all going to die soon, but still, people have to fucking start somewhere, and you have to meet people where they're at, not where you think that you want them to be. Because honestly, if I would have gone to my first protest and some anarchist walked up to me and started talking about a property destruction and we should abolish the police, I would have been like, whoa, that's really extreme. But you have to get there, a lot of it on your own, but you have to like work with people. And I think in that sense, Extinction Rebellion is good because it feels safe and yet at the same time extreme, right? Oh, we're going to block this bridge or whatever. And yet it doesn't really deal with the fundamental issues of capitalism, but it is a gateway drug for people to get in. And then I think the job of more seasoned activists and people that have been doing this for a long time, particularly frontline movements, because that's something that Extinction Rebellion has been really terrible on, is supporting frontline fights. Those people can then come into these organizing spaces with Extinction Rebellion and say like, hey, and how about this? And why don't you take a look at this? And so I think that we need to, you know, just like we're infiltrated by the CIA and shit, we need to infiltrate these sort of green capitalist spaces and talk to folks and really try to draw them towards the front lines of this fight and really get them to see this sort of crisis situation and do that in a collaborative way, right? Not in this sort of like holier than thou, you're not doing enough kind of bullshit, because then you're going to make more enemies than friends, and we really don't need that right now. So I think like for me, instead of like shitting on Extinction Rebellion or anything like that, I try to see it as a gateway drug and see like how we could use it as opposed to how we could just cast it aside and say, well, fuck those people.
That's a fantastic answer. I know you only have till 8:30. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes before that. I'm going to see if there's any particular question coming through on the chat. No, I've done some pretty thorough digging into basically all of the organizations that are propping up essentially green capitalism, and I love that fucking answer because I get cynical, and I think it's easy, but I started young and it set in. Yeah, I'm gonna hold that question till the next time we get you on a free Assange. So what's going on with Act Out? Who's because I don't know if everybody in the chat right now is hip to Act Out, and it is a fantastic show. You talk about some incredible stuff on there.
Appreciate it. Yeah, so Act Out airs online and via podcast form and on Free Speech TV, and all of the work that I do you can find via artkillingapathy.com. But basically, it's a show that it started out as a way to fill a gap that I saw during my work, which kind of culminated at Occupy LA years ago. But the idea was that alternative media does a great job on reporting what's actually happening, on telling the truth as opposed to corporatized media. But a lot of alternative media just says, "Hey, here's what's happening. This sucks, right? Back to you." And it's like, well, but what do we do? And not only what do we do, but what about the people who are already doing something? Like, let's talk about and let's pedestal the voices of those on the front lines who are fighting these fights, not just so that they get the exposure that they deserve, but also so that people can be inspired by it and say, hey, I'm not alone. Somebody else is dealing with the same shit that I'm dealing with, and they've activated in this way. I think I could activate that way. And so Act Out started as that kind of, to fill that gap, to pedestal those voices of folks that are fighting these fights. I I'm also working on a bit of a mini documentary about my time in West Virginia, in coal and fracking country, and it's kind of the same theme there. I think a lot of people look at West Virginia like it's just this throwaway resource colony, like just a bunch of hillbillies. So who cares? But I think it's really important that we treat West Virginia like a microcosm for not just this country but the world, and how important it is to, even though things have been destroyed and even though people have been oppressed, it's not over. And we can't just cast it aside and say, well, fuck West Virginia, it's just a bunch of dumb hillbillies and it's already been destroyed by coal and fracking. No, there's still so much beauty, both in terms of the landscape and in terms of the people. And it's not just worth something worth fighting for, but it's something to learn from their radical past and their radical present.
Have you ever seen the documentary Saving Gooley Mountain?
No.
Okay. Annie Sprinkles and Beth Stevens, very strong environmental activists, coined the term ecosexuals, and they marry causes, and they vary bodies of water or physical, they're my neighbors. I would love to get you guys talking.
Oh, cool.
Well, I know you gotta go. If you're watching on the YouTubes right now, stick around. I've got a couple of things I'm gonna go over. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I hope we can do this again sometime. And
yeah, absolutely.
Please tell the folks where they can find you if they're not following you and whatnot already.
Yeah, so again, you can find me at artkillingapathy.com. All the work that I'm doing is linked there. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at activist Eleanor. And thank you for doing your show and, of course, being a part of the Assange, the Free Assange movement. And yeah, glad to come on anytime.
Okay, guys, thank you so much, Eleanor. Eleanor
Thank
Goldfield, everyone. And I am going to go over here because there's some crazy. By the way, here's Julian Assange today in the prison van. Come on.
Julian, stay strong. Stay strong, Julian. We're fighting for you. We won't let them do it to you. We won't let them do this to you. Stay strong. Remember, we're here for you. Remember that. Stay strong. You will be free. Governments will not win. Wow, I can't believe it. You can talk. Talk. You can talk. Stay strong. Stay strong. It's gonna be red. Stay strong, Julian. Remember, we're here.
Gonna let that load up and come back to you guys real quick. So I gotta say, guys, I am pretty stoked on Julian Assange not looking like death warmed over. He looks much more lucid than the last images that we got to see of him. The rub is he's still not getting to spend any fucking time with his attorneys. The article, or what I have pulled up right over here is the Defend WikiLeaks live blog. So if you guys didn't know today, Julian got his court hearing postponed to the 24th, I believe. It'll probably tell us in here. But District Judge Vanessa Barriester told defense lawyer Gareth Pierce her team would only be given 1 hour to serve evidence to Assange due to a backlog of 47 people in holding cells at the courthouse. It sets us back enormously, Ms. Pierce told the court. We'll do our best, but the slippage in this timetable is extremely worrying. Her client had only been allowed 2 hours with his legal team since he last appeared in court in December. Guys, that was December, I believe, 23rd. It's almost a month without seeing your attorney or being able to prepare for your defense. And the next update here, and this is something that I believe we could politely encourage Julian Assange's legal team to move forward with, on the verge of bringing a judicial review against prison authorities for denying their client proper access to his lawyers and his case files. Westminster Magistrates Court was told today Assange appeared in person for an administrative hearing for the first time in months and was greeted by supporters raising their clenched fists in solidarity, which he acknowledged with a nod and a small wave of the hand. At the hearing, Judge Venera Barriester told Assange's lawyers that the longest period Assange will have before being taken back to Belmarsh is going to be an hour. Gareth Pierce, Assange's lead solicitor, said that his legal team came to court with the expectation that they would discuss a pretty substantial amount of evidence which only Mr. Assange can sign off on and which would take far more than an hour. The court is expecting Assange's lawyers to serve further key documents in the next couple days, but Pierce said that it would not be possible without proper time with their client. She told the court that it was willing to contact Belmarsh on her client's behalf, that a meeting with his lawyers could be secured as early as the 14th of January. They can do it in a day if you raise a stink, but if you fucking... that's so much bullshit. Judge Barriester has consistently refused to intervene with prison authorities, claiming that she has no jurisdiction to do so, despite being presented with evidence of another judge doing precisely that. This is a point that Nils Melzer has been raising so very often. The absolute arbitrariness of the way that Julian Assange is being treated. Arbitrary in the eyes of the UN, although in Melzer's personal view, as the special rapporteur on torture, it's torture. Yeah, I do believe that we could politely nudge the defense team in a show of encouragement that this would be, at the very least, a judicial review. At best, they scrap everyone involved on the Crown side and they release Julian to an Australian hospital where he can be home in his country and recover. Even if they have to put the fucking guy on house arrest, dude, get him out of goddamn prison. Like, this is brutal. Flat out brutal. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and throw them at me. If, I'm gonna cut out here in about 10 minutes. Chili Love. Seems his only hope is Bernie, who will abide by you in ruling and free him. I think that is the absolute best possible case scenario with all wishful thinking incorporated. When given the opportunity to comment on Julian Assange, he backed off and turned his back. When Jeremy Corbyn was given the opportunity to comment on Assange, he backed off and turned his back. Maduro's a tyrant, you know. Yeah, he stood up for Lula. Lula stood up for Assange. Why ain't Bernie standing up for Assange? Psychotropics will rob the inner strength. It's true. Tulsi hasn't backtracked on that, Jilly. There's, if you go to Dakarulo's Twitter page, she's got Tulsi on camera from just a week ago with one of the co-hosts of the Free Assange Vigil, Christy Dopp, asking her about Julian Assange, and she answers in detail. No, none of them are perfect, Anthony. None of them are. It's why you don't make heroes out of fucking politicians. They're not. They're not going to be. They're never going to be. Especially when we've got a very small handful of people who are controlling a very vast swath of government. I don't know. Scott Morrison is in breach of his duty of care and not standing up for this award-winning journalist. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Scott Morrison is not the Prime Minister of Australia. Scott Morrison is an errand boy and a messenger for the Five Eyes. I'm not sure if he ties his shoes without checking with the Home Office. I'm not. Just thinking of ballsy France. That's what I mean, honestly, that's what it's going to have to come to, Rob, is we're going to have to, go yellow vest style. The problem with that is this is America and the police will just open fucking fire. Like, that's going to be rough. I just can't think of any other. We're the hope. We are. Jilly, it's us. It's all of us. Our politicians aren't going to act until we push them to act, and even then it's going to take a fuck ton of us to get them to act. I don't care what their name is. They're not going to do it on their own. They're certainly not going to be allowed to do it on their own. The idea that Bernie Sanders may get elected and then govern entirely by executive order is one that I've heard floated around by like serious fucking people. That's not going to happen. It's not. It's going to take a fuck ton of people all shouting about the same thing. And the way that we can start to get that to happen is if you're concerned about the environment, go to an anti-war protest and bring your message to that anti-war protest. If you are concerned about Julian Assange, go to the protest about the environment and the anti-war protest. You see how all we need to incorporate all of our causes with whatever cause is marching that day, so that when you're leaving and you see somebody a little bit later, oh, that's that guy from the anti-war protest I was at with the fucking free Assange shit. Oh, that's that chick that had the it needs to go down that way, because we are never going to legislate our way out of an oligarchy. Revolutions do not happen at the ballot box. It really is a whole lot of us against a whole little bit of them. Anyone who understands world history from an exclusively Western colonialist perspective has little concept of world history. That's right. That's 100% right. Anthony Reyes, Rob Gino, wish you could see the younger generations. If it's not sports, it's music or games. Some of the dumbest thing that captures their imagination. It's all by design. I mean, it was sports and music and everything when I was growing up too. I don't know how old you are, Rob. I'm 41. But the amount of distraction and the screen is significantly worse. When I was growing up, like, ColecoVision was just, was a thing. Atari was a thing. I remember being like 10 or so and getting the original like 16-bit Nintendo, and I wasn't all that good at video games. And then I like was playing sports, and then I found out about girls, and I didn't care about video games for a number of years. Yeah, don't tell me you didn't have fucking sports if you're only 20 years older than me, or you didn't have distractions. What you probably didn't have was fucking 24-hour cable TV blaring division at your parents and everyone else around you. And we certainly didn't have a culture where identifying as Republican or Democrat is the exact same thing as identifying as whatever your religion is. In some cases, they enhance each other. In some cases, they augment or offset each other. But we really have come to a point to where who we are as a person is defined by our politics, and that's fucking wrong. Allied countries' protests are always unreported and labeled undemocratic. All protests are labeled undemocratic, Julie, unless they are sanctioned by the CIA. That it says so in the Bible. It does. It's right there in the Book of Murray. Is there a Book of Murray in the Bible, Barry? I'm asking my producer. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't read the Bible in a really long time. Telecommunications bill is still doing a number on us. The consolidation of media is a fucking cancer that keeps on giving. Yeah, that's true. That's true. No, they're only pro-democracy protests if they've got our stamp of approval. They weren't pro-democracy protests in Ecuador directly after that $4.2 billion IMF loan and the human trafficking of Julian Assange from the Ecuadorian embassy. I would read the Book of Bill Murray. Like, if Bill Murray were to just, like, randomly say shit and put it into Bible form style, yeah, I'd read that book. Guys, I think it's gonna do it for me right now. Wednesday, Free Assange Vigil. We're gonna have a lot to talk about. There's a story I did not go into during this live stream because I think we're gonna hold it for that. Tomorrow I'm going to be on Nico House's show. He wanted to have me to come on and talk about the Daily Beast and Tim Pool smearing me. By the way, if you missed that, the Daily Beast wrote a hit piece about me, or well, included me and used me at the opening of their hit piece about the far left internet, who thinks that maybe old CIA Pete might have ties to the CIA. Yeah. At any rate, Tim Pool picked up that story. He did this article, or did a segment on his podcast, where he literally squeals the Daily Beast to the rescue. It's fucking hilarious. So I'll be on Nico's show tomorrow at like 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern, to talk about that. I hope to see y'all Wednesday for the Free Assange Vigil. My name is Steve Poikinen. This has been Slow News Day, and good luck to us all.